Hello everyone, tonight we are walking across a quiet plain that hasn't existed for over 10,000 years. The air is strange here, thin and electric, and your breath curls into the cold like it's trying to tell you something. Ahead the mammoths have stopped, completely. Even the little ones who don't usually listen are silent. A gray sky is pressing down like a lid, and thunder is grumbling somewhere far off. Though honestly, it doesn't feel that far off anymore. You hear it before you feel it, a deep, resonant vibration like someone humming into a canyon. A sound that doesn't come through your ears but through your rib cage. One mammoth, old, tall, and very tired, lifts her head and stretches her trunk to the sky. And then in a moment that should be too ancient to see, she cries. Not the kind of cry you're thinking of. There's no dramatic music swelling behind her, no glittering tear sliding down her cheek in slow motion. But there is moisture, thick and real, glistening at the corners of her dark, weathered eyes. Her breath trembles. Her whole body seems to exhale, and around her, the rest of the herd sinks a little lower into their bones. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. You shuffle along a few steps behind the herd. Their footprints are enormous miniature lakes with muddy edges, and you realize just how much weight presses into the earth with each step. A faint smell rides the breeze, something mineral electric. You don't know it consciously, but your body does. Ozone. The atmosphere has started rearranging itself, and your skin is one big antenna. The mammoths know it too. That's the strangest part. No one's told them anything. No daily forecast, no panicked news anchors. And yet here they are, still as stone, watching the horizon, like it just said something offensive. Historians still debate whether mammoths had some sort of sixth sense for storms. Was it just their ability to detect infrasound, a frequency lower than the human ear can register? Or were they reading subtle signs from the ground itself? Some scientists suggest mammoths could feel minute shifts in seismic pressure through their footpads. In other words, they may have been walking on an early warning system. The matriarch, the one who cried, moves again, just a little. Her trunk drags across the ground like it's searching for something she dropped. She makes a low sound, barely audible, and the herd shifts position. They don't scatter, they don't stampede. But something in the air has changed. You feel it even from this distance. It's like the tension in a room where someone just said, "We need to talk." Odd fact for tonight: elephants today sometimes mourn their dead by stroking the bones with their trunks, revisiting grave sites years after a death. It's unclear if mammoths did the same, but their modern cousins offer hints. Imagine a herd circling back to where a calf once fell, only now that same spot hums with the threat of thunder. So what made that mammoth cry? Could it be that they had an emotional response to storms? After all, elephants show signs of fear, confusion, and even grief. Maybe it wasn't just the weather. Maybe it was the memory of what storms have taken. You don't survive Ice Age winters without losing something. The herd begins to move again, but slowly, reluctantly, as if every footstep is an argument. You walk in the wet imprint of their lives, and the wind picks up. It whistles around your ears, low and sharp, and somewhere in the static of it all, you think you hear a distant bellow, a long, drawn-out note full of warning and weariness. A calf stumbles a bit as the terrain slopes downward. One of the juveniles, perhaps a sibling or just a herd mate, nudges it with a tusk. Not hard, just enough to say, "Keep going." And it does. That's all it takes sometimes. There's something about watching these creatures from a distance that makes you feel smaller than usual. Not just in size, in time. Like you're watching a memory that never belonged to you but still aches in a familiar part of your chest. You glance back at the sky. The clouds are doing something unnatural, twisting into shapes that feel wrong, like they're performing for an audience that doesn't understand the language. Lightning dances in the distance, silent for now, but you know the sound is coming. It always is. The matriarch stops again. She turns slightly, her eyes sweeping the horizon as if counting heads. There's a sense of inventory in her pause, a calculation. You can almost hear her thinking, how many storms have I seen? How many did we outrun? How many outran us? One of her ears flutters. She blinks, then makes that low sound again. This time it feels more like a question than a command. The herd answers not with voices but with movement. They begin shifting into a tighter cluster like an instinct older than memory is aligning them. And somewhere in the stillness another cry, higher pitched, quieter, a juvenile this time. Not fear exactly, more like confusion, or maybe wonder. You'd cry too if the sky started yelling and no one could explain why. So yes, mammoths might have cried before storms. Whether from pressure, memory, or emotion, their bodies responded to what the air was whispering. And tonight, as that whisper turns into a scream, you get the strange sense that you're not just watching history. You're standing in its echo. The matriarch stands a little apart now, outlined against a bruised sky. You watch her profile shift in the fading light, the curve of her brow, the long arc of her trunk, and for a moment it feels like you're looking at a statue half buried in time. But then she exhales through her nostrils a slow, misty plume, and the statue breathes. You crouch low, watching her head tilt just slightly, ears flicking like radio dishes catching static. It isn't dramatic this moment, but something's happening. Something internal. The space beneath her skin, her bone structure, her great hidden machinery is resonating. Let's talk about mammoth skulls for a moment. You probably didn't come here for cranial engineering, but you're getting it anyway. Their heads weren't just big, they were architectural. The top of a mammoth's skull held vast air chambers, sinuses that ballooned out like acoustic vaults. Scientists now believe those hollow spaces could have worked like sound amplifiers, resonating low-frequency rumbles from miles away. It's like carrying a built-in cathedral inside your face, one that echoes with the mood of the world. And when they made noise, those infrasonic calls that traveled for kilometers across ice and snow, those sinuses vibrated. So it's not impossible to imagine a world where sound was less about volume, more about pressure, less a roar, more a felt shift in the atmosphere. Like someone nudging your internal organs with a baseline. The matriarch opens her mouth slightly, not to eat, not to trumpet, but to release a sound you can't quite hear. You only know it's real because the younger mammoths all react. One of them flicks its trunk like it got tapped by invisible fingers. Another shuffles its feet, turning toward her in slow, uncertain orbit. Historians still debate whether these infrasonic cries were for navigation warning or emotional expression. Some think they were a kind of sonar among giants whales of the tundra. Others argue they were just biological foghorns. I'm here, don't lose me. But then again, who's to say they couldn't also weep in those same registers? The old mammoth's eye blinks. A tear, or something that looks like one, gathers again in the corner and rolls slowly down the dark, leathery fold. It's not glamorous, it's thick, messy. And again, not entirely clear whether it's from sadness or biology. But it's there, and you're here to see it. Odd fact, break: the African elephant's skull is about 25% air. That's a lot of space not doing much unless, of course, it is doing something. Like amplifying internal pressure, protecting delicate olfactory systems, or serving as a natural sound chamber. There's even speculation that these air pockets helped manage temperature in extreme climates. A head built like a living thermos, not a bad deal when you're wandering through a blizzard buffet. Back to the present. Or the Ice Age, technically. Lightning zigzags across the distance, quick, bright, brief. No thunder yet, just the visual threat of it. You glance at the matriarch again. She's not watching the sky anymore. She's watching her own kind. The sound she released, whatever frequency it was, is being answered. A subadult male, still fuzzy and square-shouldered, leans in close to another adult, their trunks brushing. Not playfully, not aggressively, just brushing. A kind of check-in. Are you still here? One calf bellows, not loud, but sharp. It's answered immediately by three others in the group, creating a sudden soft cacophony of nervous harmonies. It sounds almost musical, like a choral warm-up in the dark. Your own ears hum, not from noise, but from proximity. You're so close to something ancient that your body hasn't fully caught up. It's like the wind is full of stories and your bones are trying to translate. The matriarch steps forward again. One foot sinks deeper than expected, and she hesitates. Then she pulls her leg free with a heavy squelch and grunts just once. A warning, maybe. Or irritation. Or pain. She cries again. This time you catch more detail. The eye moistens visibly. There's no twitch, no external debris, just that slow release of wetness under a low-pressure sky. And here's the thing. Some paleontologists believe mammoths, like modern elephants, produce tears not only for lubrication or protection, but potentially as part of a stress response. Just like us. If that's true and it's still debated, then maybe that elder isn't reacting to dust, but to memory. Or fear. Or both. The storm's pressure has intensified now. You feel it in your temples, a vague clenching. If mammoths did cry before storms, maybe it was because their heads literally hurt. Sinuses compressing nerves, tingling skulls humming. A biological alarm that no one taught them to ignore. A younger mammoth sneezes and jolts like it surprised itself. The others flinch and crowd tighter. The herd is compressing, drawing together, building itself into a wall against what's coming. And here's where the joke is on you. Because despite all this majestic behavior, mammoths were probably just as confused about storms as we are. No matter how big your brain is or your sinuses, you still can't explain why the sky makes noise and sometimes hurts your ears. All you can do is group up and cry a little. You think of modern animals and how they behave before earthquakes or tsunamis. Dogs whining, cats hiding, birds vanishing. Maybe this is just the Ice Age version of that, towering beasts pausing mid-journey to mourn a change in pressure. A second bolt of lightning flickers. This time, thunder follows. It rolls across the land like a curtain, tearing slowly in half. You feel it in your ribcage, your teeth. The herd jolts, not violently, but enough. Enough to know that the sky has spoken and the next act has begun. The matriarch lowers her head again. You wonder what she's remembering? A calf lost in mud. A mate struck down during a flood. Or maybe nothing at all. Maybe she's just an old creature in a world that's bigger than her. She cries a third time. And now you know it's not just water. It's memory made visible. The first drop hits your cheek and disappears before you can even react. The second lands in your hair. By the third, there's no more counting. The sky has opened just slightly, like it's testing its aim. But the mammoths, oh, they already knew. You step carefully. Now your boots squelching in wetting mud. The herd has stopped again, which is either wise or wildly foolish, depending on what comes next. And in the middle of them, the matriarch shifts her weight from foot to foot gently, like she's trying to tell the earth something without words. Now, here's the part that's weird. Really weird. Some scientists believe mammoths may have detected barometric pressure shifts, subtle, silent atmospheric cues that come long before the rain. It's not science fiction. Modern animals do it all the time. Deer go quiet. Sharks dive deeper. Cows lie down, though maybe they're just tired of standing. But mammoths, their feet may have been more sensitive than we ever imagined. Let's break that down. Modern elephants have special cells in their feet called Pacinian corpuscles, tiny pressure-sensitive structures that detect vibration and subtle ground movement. The theory goes that mammoths had something similar, maybe even more developed, due to the denser Ice Age substrate they walked on. That means when the air pressure dropped ahead of a storm or the distant thunder rolled just a little too deep, they may have felt it in their toes. You look at their feet now, massive round-bottom things like prehistoric ottomans, and wonder how much of the world was stored in there. The weight they carried, the tremors they read, how close a predator was, how far the ice stretched, when the sky was about to cry. The calf near the front of the herd flattens itself into a low crouch, its belly almost touching the ground. Another follows. It's like watching a dance they've done before, but don't entirely enjoy. Odd fact while we're down here, earthworms also sense barometric pressure drops. That's why they surface just before rain. So if worms can figure it out, it's not too outrageous to think mammoths could too with a much more dramatic flair. You watch as the matriarch lifts her head again and does something unexpected. She turns slightly facing away from the approaching dark. She places her front feet in the exact spots she just stepped out of. Like she's re-stepping her decisions. Like she's thinking about turning around. But she doesn't. Historians still debate whether mammoths' pressure sensitivity was a fluke of evolution or a survival necessity. Some argue their massive sinus chambers were less about smell or sound, and more about internal calibration, natural barometers built from bone. Others shrug and say they were big animals. Big animals react to weather. Thanks, Carl. A sharp wind gust cuts across the plain, now lifting bits of grass and fine grit into the air. Your eyes sting. So do theirs. You see one of the older males blink hard, then shake his enormous head. Not dramatically, just enough to suggest discomfort. It's not the rain that bothers them. It's what comes before the rain. Pressure. Invisible weight on everything. A tension in the lungs and the joints behind the eyes. If you've ever had a headache when a storm rolls in, you're halfway there. Now, imagine your head is the size of a recliner, and your sinuses have their own postcode. More of the herd is crouching now, not lying down, not quite, just sinking slightly. Knees flexed, necks lowered. Still, watchful. You think of dogs trembling under beds of toddlers hiding beneath tables. Except these toddlers weigh 8 tons and probably remember the last Ice Age flood like it was yesterday. Somewhere to your right you hear a sound. Not thunder this time. Lower, stranger. It's coming from one of the adolescent mammoths. A weird, guttural groan followed by a series of deep, echoing rumbles that don't sound like fear so much as commentary. Again, really, the matriarch doesn't answer this time. She's watching the sky, which now looks like bruised metal. You feel it pressing down on your shoulders, a weight that wasn't there an hour ago. This isn't just weather. This is atmosphere with an opinion. And the ground, it feels different. Not shaking, not rising. Just heavier, as if the planet itself is bracing for something. You crouch, copying the mammoths without meaning to. The lower you are, the easier it is to feel what they feel. There's a pull here, not emotional, not quite, but magnetic, like gravity got bored and decided to flex. That calf from earlier lets out a sharp squeal. Not distress, but surprise. A drop of water the size of a plum has landed on its head. It snorts, blinks furiously, and shuffles toward its mother. She doesn't flinch. She's weathered worse. Another interesting tidbit. Some researchers have proposed that the highly vascularized skin around elephants' feet and trunks acts as both a heat sensor and a pressure reader. Imagine if mammoths inherited that feature and turned it up to 11. They weren't just seeing or hearing the storm. They were feeling it across their entire body like a living weather radar. The herd begins to pivot now, not running, not bolting, just shifting like a school of fish under a shadow. The matriarch leads them forward not to escape the storm, but to get somewhere before it gets worse. You follow. The wind is angrier now, coming in uneven bursts that rattle your jacket and raise goosebumps on your arms. The sky cracks open with a flash so quick you don't even blink, and for the first time tonight, thunder claps close enough to hurt. The matriarch stops. Again she weeps. This time, it's different. Not a slow leak of salt in memory, but a sudden blink thick tear gathering and spilling like something just pushed her over an edge. Maybe the pressure finally got unbearable. Maybe something and some ancient told her this is the one that takes someone. You take one last look at her profile. Her skull, her trunk, her feet, all singing in a language made of air and ache. You understand none of it, but you feel every note. The rain doesn't fall. It crawls down from the sky in long slanted sheets, as if gravity got lazy and everything's moving in slow motion. It clings to your clothes, your lashes, your lips. But the mammoths, they take it differently. You watch the first streaks roll off their fur in thick rivulets, darkening the shaggy wool until the whole herd looks dipped in ink. You move beside them now, not too close, just within observation range. The young ones seem agitated. Their trunks swing nervously, swatting at nothing. One even tries to shake off the water like a golden retriever, which results in a floppy ear slap and a grunt from the matriarch. Discipline, but gentle. And here's a thought you didn't expect: storms weren't just emotional or seismic events for mammoths. They were physical. You can see it in the way their coats react. Mammoth fur was dense, layered, almost absurdly effective at keeping warmth in and wetness out. Or so we thought. But this isn't a drizzle, it's a prehistoric pressure wash. And while their fur resists most of it, humidity is a sneaky thing. Odd fact: time mammoth wool wasn't just hair. It was two types of hair: a coarse outer layer for deflecting wind and rain, and a soft undercoat for trapping heat. Kind of like wearing a raincoat over a fleece hoodie, which is great until the raincoat fails. In humid conditions, moisture may have soaked through the layers and stayed there. Mammoths might have carried the storm on their backs long after it passed. You touch a waterlogged shrub and notice how it bends, droops like even the plants can't cope. The air feels swampy close. Breathing becomes an exercise in patience. The pressure is one thing, the wet is another. And for these woolly tanks, that wasn't just annoying, it could be dangerous. Historians still debate whether mammoths had natural oil glands to repel water, like modern caribou do. There's no consensus. Some argue they secreted a light, waxy film through their skin to protect their undercoat. Others say nope, they just suffered through the rain like the rest of us. Poor giants. The matriarch pauses again. She lowers her head toward her flank and rubs her trunk across her own side, almost like she's checking for damage, or maybe scratching an itch. Hard to tell when you're built like a shag carpet with tusks. You notice how each of them moves differently now. Their steps are slower, slightly wider, like they're compensating for extra weight. Which of course they are. All that wool saturated becomes a burden, a portable storm. You wonder how much water their coats can hold. 30 pounds 50. Maybe more. The wind shifts again. Now it's colder, sharper. You instinctively wrap your arms around yourself, but the mammoths just lower their heads and press forward. Even the smallest calf knows not to stop now. And then, as if proving a point, the ground changes. It doesn't give way. It just softens. The once firm tundra is now a sponge, and with every step, the mammoths leave deeper impressions. The earth drinks the rain like it's been waiting centuries for this exact sip. A juvenile to your left struggles. Its rear foot slips slightly as it climbs a gentle incline. The mother immediately shifts position, blocking the wind, nudging the youngster forward with her shoulder. You see the calf's ear flutter. Not from cold, but from frustration. It doesn't want help, but it needs it. That's the nature of storms in this world. They strip pride right off your bones. One mammoth near the back stops completely. An older male, tusks streaked with age and dirt, just halts. He exhales hard, trunk drooping, and doesn't move for a long time. He's not giving up, just recalculating. You've done that too on a long walk when the rain gets personal. It's hard not to assign emotion to these moments. The way their shoulders slump, the way they blink against wind, the way the matriarch hums almost a lullaby to calm the smallest ones. But this isn't a cartoon. These are wild creatures surviving something ancient. Still, it feels like something more. And here's where the science collides with your heart. Because it's not just about fur and weather, it's about experience. These animals lived in weather so harsh it made our worst storms look like spa mist. They moved through freezing rain, sleet, fog thick enough to chew. They didn't have the luxury of shelter. Their coats were their homes. So when storms hit, they didn't panic, they adapted. They endured. That's not to say they weren't affected. Watch closely, the youngest in the herd keeps lifting one foot off the ground. Not limping, just uncomfortable. Maybe cold water seeped into a crack in the skin. Maybe the mud is too clingy. Maybe it just doesn't like being wet. Understandable. You glance at the matriarch again, who now looks like a soggy monument, her fur clumps in dark matted ropes. Her eyes stay open, blinking deliberately. You swear there's more moisture there now, but whether it's tears or rain runoff is anybody's guess. The herd shifts again, seeking higher ground. A nearby rocky outcrop offers some elevation, just enough to escape the deepest mud. They move as a unit despite the weather, despite the weight. You can hear the squish of soaked fur brushing against fur. There's a rhythm to it, like dripping metronomes. You stay low as you follow. The wind catches your face now and then, delivering a fine mist that's more insult than injury. You're soaked too, but nowhere near their scale. You're a wet sock in the corner. They're soaked novels in the rain. The climb is slow, not because they're weak, but because they're smart. The mud is deceptive. One wrong step could twist an ankle. And when you weigh 6 tons, that's not a sprain, it's a sentence. Finally, the matriarch stops at the top. She looks back. She counts. Everyone's here. Everyone's upright. She cries again, not dramatically. Just enough to know she's still keeping track of what the world takes. The herd clusters together now, shoulder to shoulder. You hear soft rumbles echo across their chests. Reassurance, maybe. Or maybe it's just breath. The storm isn't over, but they've made it this far. You blink the rain from your eyes and feel your own shoulders slump a little. Somehow you feel heavier too. Because sometimes it's not just wool that carries the water. The sky is darker now. Not night, not quite. Just storm dark, which is its own flavor of doom. There's no horizon anymore. Everything is gray and trembling. Even the birds have stopped arguing. You squint through the mist at the herd. They've paused again, halfway between the muddy lowland and the rocky shelf above. It's not indecision. It's something deeper, something coded into their bones. The whole group just freezes. No movement, no rumbling, not even a trunk twitch. It's unnerving. You stand there soaked and shivering, wondering what they're sensing that you're not. Something in the air has changed again, beyond the rain, beyond the pressure. There's a static stillness now, like the earth is holding its breath. And you start to notice it too. That strange, sharp smell. Not strong, not yet, but definitely there. Metallic, electric, it's ozone. Fun fact, humans can smell ozone too, though not nearly as well as animals. It's that weird, clean smell right before a thunderstorm. Think photocopier meets swimming pool. But mammals, especially big ones with powerful olfactory systems, can detect it earlier, stronger. To a mammoth, ozone might not mean rain's coming. It might mean run. Historians still debate whether mammoths truly froze at the scent of ozone, or whether this was part of a broader storm behavior, a moment of recalibration before the next move. But standing here watching them become statues, you're convinced this is no ordinary pause. It's collective, instinctual, almost sacred. The matriarch's trunk hovers inches off the ground, curled slightly as if mid-thought. Her eyes are wide-focused, not on a predator, not on you, but on the air itself. And the rest of the herd follows her lead. One by one, each mammoth stops chewing, stops shifting weight, even stops snorting. There's no command barked, no trunk slap of discipline. They just know. You shift uneasily. Even your breath feels too loud now. You don't belong in this kind of silence, no one does. It's the kind of quiet that lives under thunder. Then a small calf lets out a confused warble, soft and wobbling, like a voice cracking mid-sentence. Immediately, two adults shift closer, forming a barrier with their bodies. Not aggressively, just protectively. The ozone smell strengthens. Odd fact: dogs often panic before storms, not because of the noise, but because of changes in static electricity. Some even hide in bathtubs to ground themselves. So maybe mammoths felt this too, not as fear, but as interference. Static pinging against their giant wool-covered bodies. You take a step forward. Just one. The squelch of your boot feels like an alarm. The nearest mammoth's ear flicks towards you, but it doesn't move. None of them do. You suddenly feel like the guy who walks into a funeral late and loudly opens a granola bar. The air pops faintly, a tiny crack like bubble wrap. Then again, you don't know what that means, but the mammoths do. You see it in the way their eyes narrow. Not panic, just preparation. Then, without a signal, they lower their heads. Every single one. You half expect them to kneel in prayer. But they don't. They just hunker slightly, limbs stiffer now, weight spread evenly. They're bracing. For what you ask. For the boom. And here it comes. Thunder rips across the landscape like it's dragging claws through the sky. It doesn't roll, it slams. You flinch. Your spine vibrates. For a moment, everything is sound and nothing is stable. The mammoths don't move. They absorb it, like towers designed to sway with the wind. This is what they do when the air turns violent. They don't stampede, they root. And why? That's the strange part. No one knows exactly why mammoths chose stillness over escape in moments like this. Maybe because there was no escape. A mammoth isn't outrunning a storm. You weigh 6 tons. You commit. Or maybe there's an older reason. Some researchers believe mammoths relied on each other's body heat and mass, and storms and freezing in place literally helped preserve that bubble. If one ran, the whole equation failed. Stillness was strength. And here's something poetic for your soggy little notebook. The only thing louder than a storm is a herd that chooses silence. You stare at the matriarch. Her eyelids flutter but don't close. She's blinking in time with lightning flashes now. Ma sting them. Is timing the delay to thunder. Like she's listening for a pattern. She breathes deeply. Her ribs expand like a bellows. A drop of water slides down the ridge of her skull, curving around the eye, vanishing into fur. Maybe a tear, maybe not. And then you realize something odd. They've stopped moving not out of fear, but out of choice. This is their system reboot. Their storm ritual. And it works. The younger ones stop trembling. The air calms just slightly, as if acknowledging their reverence. The lightning backs off, not gone, just waiting. The matriarch lifts her head and exhales. It's not dramatic, no trumpeting, no desperate call, just air moving through memory. You stay still too. Somehow being a moving object in this moment feels rude. The rain continues gentler now. It wraps around the mammoths like fog around statues. The ground holds them quiet and firm. And for one breath, maybe two, the world seems balanced. Like something terrible passed by and decided not to stay. The youngest among them has had enough. The little calf may be no more than a year old. Legs still wobbling with that toddler on stilts energy, lets out a sudden high-pitched squeal and drops onto its knees with a muddy plop. Just gives up on standing all together like a drama queen with too much rain in its ears. You watch as its little body slumps fully into the soaked earth belly to ground trunk curled under its chin. And the weird part, it's not the only one. All around the herd, the juveniles begin to fold. Not collapse, nothing panicked or tragic. Just a slow, yielding surrender to the mud beneath them. One by one, they lower themselves, legs folding neatly, sometimes awkwardly, into the soft terrain. Like they've all agreed without speaking. Nope. We're sitting this part out. You'd laugh if it weren't so haunting. Meanwhile, the adults remain standing. Towering above the shivering heap of their offspring, motionless and enormous, they form a kind of living barrier, hulking silhouettes pressed against the screaming wind. Their bodies curve around the little ones like walls of heat, and mass shielding them from gusts that now feel sharp enough to bruise. You crouch lower, your fingers digging into the damp ground for balance. The storm is talking again, not just with thunder but with language. Wind howls past your ears in full sentences speaking in vowels. The mammoths seem to understand, or at least respect the noise enough not to argue. And then comes the sound again, that strange, resonant infrasonic groan. It comes from deep within one of the adults. The matriarch? Could be. You don't see her mouth move, but the sound is there vibrating through the air like a slow heartbeat. Odd fact of the night, baby elephants today often press against their mothers in bad weather, not only for warmth but for reassurance. Physical contact for them is like language therapy, a group hug with extra fur. Scientists believe mammoths likely behave the same way, huddling together, touching trunks, pressing sides. Survival, sure, but also comfort. One of the juveniles lets out a soft whimper, a pitiful, deflated noise, and buries its face into the matriarch's rear leg. She doesn't flinch, just shifts slightly to give the calf better cover. Historians still debate whether this behavior, this hunkering in storms, was instinct-learned behavior or part of some larger social structure. Did mammoth parents actively teach their young to stay low during dangerous weather? Or was it just hardwired into those shaggy skulls? No one's found a cave painting of a mammoth rain drill yet, but honestly, it wouldn't surprise anyone. You inch closer, almost forgetting your own discomfort. Your boots are heavy with mud, your hair plastered against your head, but something about this moment demands your presence. It feels old, ritualistic, like something you're lucky to see without being seen. One of the adolescents, larger than a calf but not quite grown, doesn't kneel yet. It sways legs, stiff, blinking furiously as rain slides into its eyes. It's pretending to be brave. We've all done it. Then, without warning, a gust of wind knocks it sideways, not enough to topple it, but enough to humble it. It stumbles, grunts, then slumps beside its siblings, defeated and relieved. The matriarch shifts again. She's still standing, but now she's angling her massive flank against the wind. Her fur ripples violently, rain sluicing off in thick sheets. She's not moving for her own comfort. She's blocking more of the storm for the little ones behind her. You wonder how long she's done this. How many calves she's stood guard over in storms just like this. How many didn't make it? That kind of knowledge settles behind the eyes. Heavy, old, quiet. One of the younger calves reaches its trunk up and presses it against another's side. Not for balance, just presence. A small, desperate hello in the middle of a gray and growling world. Another flash of lightning, no delay this time. The thunder follows instantly. Boom! You jump. Everyone does. But the mammoths don't run. They don't flinch. Not anymore. They kneel deeper. And for the first time, the adults begin to lower themselves. Slowly, deliberately, each one bends its legs first front, then back, until their bellies rest against the soaked ground. It's not retreat. It's ritual. Submission not to fear, but to endurance. The matriarch is the last to sink. She does it with the grace of a ship anchoring in rough waters. Her body becomes a shelter, her shape casting shadows even in this dim light. You want to call it beautiful, but really it's functional. They do this because it works. Lowering their bodies helps them conserve heat, shield the calves, and ride out the worst of the wind. They're like ancient furry domes, living bunkers with tusks. And in this position, huddled together, mostly still, you hear the soft symphony of breath. Not the harsh panting of panic, not the silence of death. Just breath. Slow, measured, shared. The storm doesn't stop, but it eases. A little. The wind changes direction. The rain lets up to a steady mist. The thunder moves farther away, grumbling, now insulted that no one ran. And then a small miracle. One calf lifts its head and lets out a tiny bellow. Not fear, not warning, a question. The matriarch answers not with a roar, not with a cry, but with a hum. You don't hear it with your ears. You feel it in your chest. And just like that, the herd breathes in together. You do too. The rain has slowed to something you might generously call a drizzle, though it still manages to get everywhere down your collar, into your boots, behind your ears, like an annoying toddler with wet hands. The mammoths, however, remain mostly motionless, resting, sheltering, breathing like boulders with lungs. But then you notice it again, those shimmering drops gathering at the corners of their eyes. The matriarch blinks. Another fat bead rolls slowly down the crease beside her socket, carving a path through the matted fur on her cheek. You're close enough now to see it glisten briefly before it disappears into the rest of her weather-streaked coat. You can't help but ask yourself again, is she really crying? Or is this just another trick of biology? Time for some uncomfortable science. Elephants and likely mammoths too do produce tears. Their tear ducts help keep their eyes moist, flush out irritants, and regulate surface temperature. Which is great, functional, unromantic. The way your own eyes water when you cut onions or get hit with wind at 60 miles an hour. So technically, yes, those tears could be purely mechanical. But that's not what it feels like. Because this isn't just mist in the eye. It's the shape of the emotion you've been trying not to name. Let's talk fluids. Historians still debate whether mammoth tear ducts served a deeper social function, like expressing stress or emotional overload. We know that modern elephants produce emotional tears under duress, grief, fear, even reunion. But here's the thing, elephant tears contain higher levels of protein than simple reflex tears, which suggest a distinct biological purpose beyond just eye maintenance. Could mammoths have had a similar physiological response? Could their eyes have welled up in storms not because of rain or wind, but because of something deeper? One researcher, definitely not your average zookeeper, once suggested that mammoth crying might have been a thermal strategy. When storms brought a sudden drop in temperature, the tear ducts activated as a way to prevent the surface of the eye from freezing. It sounds made up, but Arctic hares do something similar, lubricating their eyes with a thicker-than-normal fluid in snowstorms. Gross but efficient. Odd fact time, some reptiles, like certain turtles, excrete excess salt from their eyes, giving the appearance of crying when in fact they're just handling mineral balance. The animal kingdom is full of liars, basically. Back in the present, the matriarch exhales through her trunk, and that same calf from earlier responds with a low, plaintive groan. The others stir gently, not enough to rise, but enough to realign their weight. One young mammoth noses its sibling gently in the side, and the two of them share a moment of brief, wobbly balance. And just as you're watching them, one of the adults sneezes. Not dainty, not cute. A full-body mucus-forward explosion that sends a nearby bird scrambling out of a bush in panic. You flinch too. Bless you, you whisper, because what else can you say? The sneeze dislodges something else, a smear of liquid from its eyes, now mixing with raindrops. You stare at it longer than you should. Still wondering, still unsure. It would be easy to say, no, they didn't cry. That it's just water, that it's just biology. But there's something about the way they do it quietly, communally, always during these pressure-thick storms that doesn't feel like coincidence. The matriarch's tears. If they are tears, seem rhythmic, intentional, not constant like a leaking faucet, but episodic, timed with thunder, with wind, with tension. You notice that every time lightning flares even dimly, she blinks harder. Then the moisture pools again. Maybe the light stings. Maybe the noise stresses. Maybe she's remembering something the others don't. That's the part we never get to know. Because tears don't fossilize. That's the maddening thing. We can find bones, tusks, even footprints preserved in volcanic ash or permafrost, but no one's ever found a fossilized emotion. No amber-locked tear. No imprint of grief. The soft parts, the meaningful parts, are always the first to vanish. So we're left guessing. The calf closest to you shakes its head, now flapping long ears, blinking like it's trying to reset the world. A rivulet of water slips from its eye, too, a smaller one. But undeniably real. It nestles deeper into the adult beside it. Maybe they do cry. Maybe they don't. But you can't deny that they feel. Because even if the moisture on their cheeks is just water, the behavior, the stillness, the huddling, the gentle trunk touches speaks volumes. Mammoths weren't just survivors of the Ice Age, they were thinkers, rememberers, possibly even mourners. And standing here in the wet silence, you feel oddly lucky to be witnessing a behavior that even thousands of years ago, no one could have been sure they were seeing. You wonder if any human, any of our ancestors who shared this cold earth with them, ever stood quietly in the rain and asked the same question you're asking now. Did they just cry? The herd begins to stir again slightly. Not in a rush, just shifting. Some of the juveniles are standing now mud-slick and groggy but ready. The calves blink sleepily, their trunks swaying like wet pendulums. The adults remain kneeling, a few tears still visible under their storm-damp faces. The matriarch rises slowly. Her joints creak. You swear you hear it bone on bone, fatigue on fatigue. But she gets up, one limb at a time, shaking off water like it's yesterday's grief. And as she stands, her head lifts slightly higher than before, watching the clouded horizon, listening for something. The crying stops, but the memory of it doesn't. You hear it before you understand what you're hearing. A low vibration not in your ears exactly, but in your ribs, in your spine, somewhere behind your sternum where feelings tend to hide. At first you think it's the distant growl of thunder, but no, this is closer. Stranger. Intentional. The mammoths are singing. Not like a bird song, not like a lullaby, but in that deep infrasonic register that doesn't ask for your attention, it claims it. You stand still, breath caught halfway between inhale and disbelief as the matriarch lets out a long, resonant hum that seems to make the ground shiver in agreement. It's not a random sound. It's shaped, measured, like a low-frequency mantra. And then another joins in. One of the older male's tusks, curved like ancient sabers, answers her with a slightly different tone. Together the sounds harmonize not melodically, but spatially. You feel them pinging off each other in the air, tuning forks inside giants. The calves go quiet again. Not afraid this time, listening. Odd fact, modern elephants have been recorded vocalizing long before major weather events. Not trumpeting or stamping, but using these exact kinds of low rumbles. Scientists think they're passing along storm warnings sometimes over great distances, like a prehistoric group text, but with fewer emojis and more subsonic existential dread. So, maybe that's what you're hearing now, a song before the lightning. Not a performance, a protocol. A sonic agreement that the world is about to change again and that the herd intends to face it together. You crouch low instinctively, trying to let the sound pass through you instead of around you. The mud grips your boots tighter. The wind lifts a corner of your soaked jacket and immediately regrets it. The matriarch shifts slightly, still singing. Her head is tilted downward, trunk brushing the ground as she sends her frequency out like a sonar pulse. Some scientists believe these vibrations weren't just communication, but a way to read the environment. Like echolocation, but heavier. Mood-based sonar. A concert for survival. Historians still debate the purpose of these infrasonic mammoth sounds. Were they merely practical warnings about weather predators? Obstacles? Or did they carry emotional content too? Some archaeozoologists argue that mammoths could inflect their rumbles, conveying urgency, grief, even reassurance. Others remain skeptical. Let's not project our own emotional mess onto Ice Age tanks. Fair enough. But you're standing here in the middle of a rainstorm, shaking slightly, as this ancient choir hums its way into your nervous system. And you're telling me this doesn't feel personal. The herd is fully awake now, all on their feet. Still close together, still cautious, but moving again, not far. Just shifting weight, rebalancing. You see how the adults rotate toward the matriarch, their own rumbles joining hers like satellites locking into orbit. Together their tones rise and fall in slow tidal swells. Not loud, never loud, but full of shape and purpose. Then silence. It's not broken. It's offered. A pause. You hold your breath instinctively, unsure whether something is supposed to answer. Then, just as quickly, the matriarch releases a different sound, shorter, brighter, still low but with a pulse that feels like punctuation. A period, a direction. And the herd begins to move. Not in panic, not with haste, but deliberately, as if the singing confirmed something, as if a decision was made. You watch as they form into a loose line, each one trailing the one ahead. The matriarch leads her steps slow but certain hooves, sinking deeply into soft mud. You follow because what else are you going to do? And as you walk behind them, you hear the singing again. Not all of them now, just the ones in the rear. It's different this time, softer fading as they move, like a song not meant for the storm but for what comes after. A hymn for the survivors. Oddest fact of the night. Humpback whales and elephants, two species separated by evolution and habitat, vocalize in strikingly similar infrasonic frequencies. Some scientists believe there are universal wavelengths in nature-shared languages that species tap into to navigate stress, migration, and community. Imagine mammoths tuning into that shared channel, singing along with whales across the Ice Age sea. Your boots squelch in rhythm now, oddly in sync with the pace of the herd. The storm still murmurs behind you, grumbling like an insulted god, but its volume has faded. The air smells less sharp. The tension in your shoulders is still there but muted, like the worst part is behind you even if nothing actually changed. You look at the youngest calf trotting awkwardly to keep up. It hums, just once, a little warble in its chest. A mimic of what the adults did, as if to say, I'm learning. And the matriarch turns slightly at the sound. Just enough to acknowledge. Just enough to say, I heard you. It hits you in that moment. This isn't just weather behavior. It's culture. Shared memory carried through sound. Not just about this storm, but every storm. Every flood. Every chase. Every loss. The rumbles they send into the earth are more than warnings, they're archives. So maybe that's what crying meant too. Not just pain, but memory. They don't leave behind songs carved into rocks. They don't build shrines or paint murals. Their legacy is vibration, low and long and hard to forget if you ever got the chance to hear it. The sky begins to open slightly overhead. Not blue, not yet, but a hint of less gray. And as light shifts across the herd, you see moisture still clinging to the matriarch's cheeks. Not washed away, not hidden. Just there, carried forward. Like the last note of a song that never ends. The herd moves with a kind of tired momentum, now slow but sure, like the storm carved something out of them that can't be replaced, only carried. The matriarch leads with that same quiet authority, hooves, punching deep into the mud trunk, sweeping as she walks, reading the world like Braille. But not all of them are here. You notice it in the shape of the formation, off by one. A slight gap in the line, like a missing tooth in a smile too old to explain. The mammoths aren't acting panicked, but they're not relaxed either. One of the subadults keeps glancing behind him as if expecting someone to catch up. Someone who won't. You fall back slightly, letting the herd drift ahead so you can take it in. They're recalibrating, redistributing, not frantically searching, not yet, but aware. Something's changed. Someone has wandered off. Maybe they do this all the time. Maybe there's always one who decides the herd's pace isn't the right one. Maybe solitude calls to some mammoths the way it does to people with false promises of freedom and open space. You know that voice. I'll just catch up later. Famous last words. You remember seeing that juvenile earlier, larger than a calf but not old enough to have the full wisdom of storms. The one that stood longer than the others. Who hesitated? Whose stance screamed, I'll be fine. And now that mammoth is gone. The matriarch hasn't stopped. But she slows, slightly, as if hoping that whoever is missing will use the sound of their collective footsteps to find their way back. They don't. Odd fact, elephant herds today will search for lost members for days. They'll double back circle, linger in areas where they last saw their kin. There are documented cases of matriarchs returning to the same spot annually long after the bones have gone. They remember, maybe even grieve. Historians still debate whether mammoths kept the same fidelity to the missing. Did they mourn absences the way elephants do? Or was the Ice Age too brutal for lingering sentiment? Some argue their lives were too defined by hunger and hazard to make room for ritual. Others point to cave etchings that seem to depict lone mammoths ringed by other figures, perhaps a warning, perhaps a story. The one you're thinking of now is a tusk carving found half buried in a Siberian shelter. It's crude but haunting. A single mammoth stands apart from the herd, its head-lowered trunk reaching toward jagged lines that might be cliffs or lightning. It's alone and fading. No one knows who carved it or why. You imagine the missing one now, somewhere off-trail, disoriented not just by weather, but by silence. The rain has dulled, but the world hasn't grown any kinder. Wind still cuts through the brush like razors through wool. The scent of the herd is weaker now, easy to lose, easier to forget. Maybe he's calling. Maybe they can't hear him anymore. Or maybe he's not calling at all. Some animals, when separated, scream. Others go quiet, hidden by fear, pride, or simple resignation. You wonder what this mammoth chose. The herd continues forward, but they're not whole. Not really. The calf closest to you keeps peering into the trees, ears twitching. The matriarch rumbles softly, a sound you now understand as both reassurance and inventory. She knows who's gone, and she knows not to stop. That's the terrible weight of leadership, choosing the needs of many over the grief of one. Still, she hesitates at a ridge. You almost miss it, but it's there. A small pause. Her head turns just slightly, eyes scanning the lowland one last time. The others wait, not impatiently but expectantly. They're used to this pattern. It's happened before. And it will happen again. Then the matriarch raises her trunk and releases a single haunting note. Not the deep infrasonic call of navigation. Not the warm hum of reassurance. This one is different. It pierces you, thin and hollow, like a memory escaping through a crack in the skull. It travels across the valley in a wide arc, searching, hoping, demanding. A sonic flare fired into the wilderness, and there is no answer, just the wind apologizing. Oddest fact, in some African elephant groups, researchers have observed name-like calls, distinct vocalizations for specific individuals. These sounds aren't just noise, they're identifiers, personalities rendered in tone. If mammoths did the same, then maybe what the matriarch just said was a name. A last attempt to pull the lost one home. But the trees don't give anything back. No shadow moves. No reply comes. The herd moves on. There's a reason stories of wanderers appear in every culture. The one who steps away, who doesn't come back. Sometimes they're foolish, sometimes brave, sometimes just unlucky. But their stories always end the same: a blank space in the formation and silence where a rumble should have been. You keep looking behind you as you walk, just in case. But the missing one is truly gone, not forgotten. Never that. Just out of reach. The herd is quieter now. Not the sacred stillness from before the storm, but a softer, wearier quiet, the kind that settles in after something has been lost, and everyone agrees silently not to speak about it yet. You trail behind them, eyes sweeping the trees, still listening for footsteps that won't come. But something else catches your attention instead. A flicker in the shadows. Movement, but not mammoth. At first you think it's a trick of the rain light, a shifting branch, or maybe a fox darting between the rocks. But then you see it again, low to the ground, deliberate. A silhouette that doesn't belong to this slow-moving family of giants. Predators. Two of them now pacing parallel to the herd, keeping their distance but not hiding. You can make out the shape: long-legged, narrow-muzzled, lean as famine-dire wolves. Larger than today's wolves by a fair margin, and a lot less patient when they're hungry. And they are definitely hungry. They don't charge, though, not yet. They're opportunists, not idiots. You're walking beside the Ice Age equivalent of armored tanks. One wrong move, and they'll be flattened into fossil pancakes. Still, they linger, because they know what you know. The herd is off by one, and predators can smell absence better than blood. Odd fact, wolves and big cats today can detect the emotional state of prey animals by posture and smell. Fear literally has a scent part pheromone, part sweat, part posture. If the mammoths are mourning, the dire wolves know it. They smell the grief, and they like what it suggests. Historians still debate how predators of the Pleistocene interacted with mammoths. Most agree that full-grown mammoths were rarely attacked, too big, too dangerous, too much effort. But calves, the sick, the separated, those were fair game. Dire wolves, saber-toothed cats, even the occasional human. Mammoth meat was high-risk, high-reward cuisine. You scan the edges of the forest again, and there higher up something larger moves. Slower, stronger. A saber-toothed cat, just one perched on a rocky ledge like a ghost with fangs, watching. It doesn't stalk or pace, it waits. An ambush predator born of shadows and patience. You meet its gaze and your brain quietly short-circuits. This thing isn't here for you, not yet. But if the mammoths weren't around, you'd already be gone. The matriarch knows that they're there. She doesn't look. She doesn't need to. Her ear flicks in their direction and her pace subtly shifts. She nudges the herd toward a tighter formation. Adults move inward, flanking the young. You watch the whole mass reconfigure with the quiet efficiency of a seasoned military unit. And then something eerie happens. They sing again. Low rumbles, layered, purposeful. Not like before, these are sharper. Terse. Less melodic, more mechanical. You don't feel this in your chest, you feel it in your bones. It's a warning. A frequency not meant for communication but for control. A psychological weapon. Because here's something. Science is just starting to understand low-frequency sound can influence predator behavior. It's disorienting, discomforting. It's why lions roar at a pitch that resonates more than it stings. It's not about volume, it's about dominance. Mammoths knew that too. The dire wolves retreat a few paces, not running, just repositioning. One of them lets out a huff, less a growl, more a fine, "We'll wait." The saber-tooth remains still. Not impressed, not threatened, just observant. The herd continues moving tighter now, their steps heavier, more deliberate. You can tell they're not in panic mode, they're in defense mode, which, to be clear, is far more terrifying. Panic is chaotic, but defense, that's tactical. The calf closest to the rear stumbles slightly in the mud. It's fine, one of the adults is right there, helps it back up. But the predators see it. A moment of vulnerability, a note in the song they understand too well. And here's the chilling truth, the predators don't need to attack today. They just need to follow. Long enough, quietly enough. Eventually something breaks. Oddest fact in modern wolf packs? Some individuals are designated shadows wolves that follow herds at a distance for days without attacking, waiting for fatigue or injury to isolate a victim. The Ice Age likely had its own shadows, some of them with tusks of their own. The matriarch's trunk brushes the ground again. She's not sniffing, she's sending vibration. You feel it barely. Another message, maybe even a name, a check-in, a call for the missing one. Still no answer. The wolves veer off, slightly retreating into the thicker part of the forest. The saber-tooth vanishes completely like it was never there. But you can still feel them. Not gone, just circling. Waiting. The herd presses on. A bit faster now. Not a run. Just a pace built from memory. A rhythm they've used before, probably after other storms, other losses, other disappearances. You don't say anything and there's nothing to say. But you do wonder, how many times has this happened? How many songs have ended with fewer voices than they began with? The wind returns curling around your face with the cold breath of things that want to eat you. You look to the matriarch who doesn't blink, doesn't cry, doesn't tremble. She just leads, because the world is full of teeth, and someone has to sing louder than them. You don't notice the bones until you're already walking among them. The ground shifts beneath your feet, not soft, not like the damp terrain you've been slogging through. This place is firmer but strange. It crunches faintly, and when you glance down you see the glint of something smooth under a layer of moss. You brush the surface clean with your fingers, and there it is, the curved tip of a tusk half swallowed by the earth. The herd hesitates too, not because they fear this place, more like they recognize it. Ahead, the matriarch slows. She steps onto the rise without drama, but her eyes sweep left then right and her pace falters. A calf beside her lets out a low, uncertain whine. The others begin to close in, instinctively gathering tighter. You're standing in a graveyard, not marked with stones or crosses, but the signs are everywhere once you see them. Ridges where ribs have settled into the soil. Deep divots where skulls collapsed long ago under the weight of centuries. You can see parts of the skeletons ivory-stained, like tea peeking from the mossy earth like long-lost punctuation marks in a sentence written in bones. And they're all mammoths, an entire family maybe. Maybe several, clustered, layered, tangled. You step softly now. Odd fact, mammoth death pits exist all over Eurasia and North America, sites where entire groups appear to have died at once. The causes vary: tar pits, blizzards, mudslides, flash floods. But sometimes the evidence is less obvious. No broken limbs, no attack signs, just a herd that stopped. You look up at the sky, still layered with low clouds. It's calm now, almost gentle. But that doesn't erase what might have happened here. A past storm, a flash flood, a false turn, maybe even a decision. Historians still debate what brought down the family that lies here. Some theorize it was a seasonal trap, a basin that filled with water faster than the herd could escape. Others think it was illness, sickness, sweeping through the group like a cold wind leaving behind only bones. A few speculate it was grief. That one fell and the rest refused to leave. You're not supposed to project emotions onto extinct megafauna, but standing here, seeing how close the remains are, how some skulls tilt toward one another, tusks overlapping like clasped hands, you start to wonder if death for mammoths was less a moment and more a gathering. The matriarch steps forward again, and this time she makes a sound. Soft, hollow, like breathing into a bottle at the bottom of a lake. It's not a warning, not a command, it's a recognition. She knows this place. Whether by smell, by memory, by frequency, it doesn't matter. She's been here, or maybe someone she knew was. The herd does not graze. No one plays. Even the calves are quiet now. This is not a resting place. This is sacred ground. One of the adults gently presses its foot down beside a barely visible skull. It lingers there for a moment, then lifts it again as if trying not to disturb what's beneath. Another mammoth walks a slow curve around a cluster of ribs, veering off the easiest path with what feels like deliberate care. You feel something strange in your chest. A heaviness, not sorrow. Exactly, something older. As if the air is denser here. As if time forgot to keep moving. Then you notice the way the herd subtly alters its pattern. They're shifting to the right, skirting a low depression in the earth. And in that depression, a large mound of moss and sediment too symmetrical to be natural. You kneel and touch the center. It gives. Underneath is a skull upside down, as if the mammoth had fallen backward in its final moment. It's enormous. Likely a matriarch from long ago. You glance toward the living matriarch now. She's still. Her eyes are on the ground. Her breath comes in long, slow pulls. She doesn't cry this time, but her whole body seems to lower slightly, like she's sinking under an invisible weight. Oddest fact, in some modern elephant herds, members have been observed stopping at bone sites for extended periods, even caressing the remains with their trunks swaying quietly beside them. There's no clear evolutionary benefit to this behavior. It doesn't help them find food or water, but they do it anyway. Call it ritual. Call it mourning. Call it memory. You hear a soft rumble, one of the middle-aged males standing at the edge of the burial field, calling gently to the rest. His tone isn't sharp. It's like a suggestion. Let's keep moving. The herd doesn't rush. They pass through the graveyard slowly, quietly, never touching the bones but always aware. As you walk with them, you look once more at the skulls half buried in the grass. Some of them are tilted toward one another. Some are alone. You wonder which ones waited for the others to catch up. You wonder which ones never left. The last calf to leave the site pauses near a collapsed rib cage, hesitating just a little longer than the rest. It doesn't touch the bones, just lowers its head. Then it turns and walks on. And so do you, because the dead don't need to be disturbed. They're already remembered. You wouldn't call it a cave exactly, more like a hollow. An overhang in the limestone where the rock has weathered inward, shallow but dry. The mammoths don't enter, of course. It's too small, too angular for giants, but they pause nearby as if drawn to it. You follow their gaze. The matriarch lingers at the edge of a scrubby rise, eyes fixed on the wall like it's whispering to her in a language only ancient bones can hear. You step inside. The air smells like wet stone and old ash. You duck instinctively, humans always do in places like this, even if the ceiling's high enough. There's a stillness here that feels more like memory than shelter. And on the wall, right where the soot begins to gray, are the markings. Faint, simple, haunting, painted in ochre and charcoal, smudged with time and water. You see the shape of a mammoth, rounded back, short-tail crescent tusks curving forward like moonrise. It's not a masterpiece. The proportions are off. One leg is too long. The eye is just a dot. But the line of the back, it's unmistakable. Someone who'd seen a mammoth made this. You move closer. There's another shape, smaller, curled inward, a calf, and beside them, both oddly stylized, almost like a scribble, is a single jagged line zigzagging down from above. Lightning, maybe, or something else. Below the line beneath the mammoth's painted eye is a dark smudge that trails downward. A tear. You exhale slowly. Historians still debate whether these markings depict actual events or symbolic stories. Was this cave wall a record of prayer? An act of reverence? Or was someone simply trying to make sense of what they saw, giant animals crying under a violent sky? You step back, taking in the full image. The mammoth and its calf huddled beneath a storm. No ground drawn, just airweight sorrow. You imagine the person who painted it, alone in the dark with firelight flickering, ash and pigment on their fingers, watching mammoths survive something they couldn't understand and needing to remember it. Odd fact, many cave paintings from the Upper Paleolithic period show animals in passive or contemplative poses, not in motion or chase. Researchers suggest this was deliberate, less about action, more about relationship. As if humans weren't always the hunters, but sometimes the watchers. You touch the edge of the wall just lightly. The stone is cold, damp but not lifeless. Behind you, the herd shifts again. The matriarch hasn't moved closer, but she's still watching. Her ears angle slightly toward the cave, not in fear, in recognition, as if something in the rock speaks the same language she does. You think of modern elephants passing by places their families once died, of mothers returning to the sites of fallen calves, of herds pausing, not grazing, not drinking, just being there, rooted in a shared grief. This cave feels like one of those places, not sacred because of what it holds, but because of what it witnessed. A gust of wind flows through the opening, fluttering the small roots hanging from the ceiling like pale whiskers. You stand still, letting it wrap around you as if it might carry a memory you don't deserve to hear. Then you spot something else just beneath the larger drawing, a row of dots. Not random, deliberate, like counting. 5 dots, then a gap, then 1. You wonder what they meant. How many were here? How many are left? The matriarch lets out a low rumble, snapping you out of it. The herd is moving again, They don't linger, they don't touch the cave, but they do pass by it slowly as if paying silent tribute. One calf pauses. It looks at the walls, just for a moment, then it trots to catch up. And you're left in the mouth of the hollow with only the wind and the red ochre mammoth crying on the stone. You step out. The air feels different now. Drier, cooler, almost tired. The storm has passed, but its echo lingers in the way the leaves don't rustle and the way your boots sink just slightly with each step. The herd moves more loosely now, less bunched, but the weight of the day still clings to their shoulders. They remember, because this isn't a world of forgetting. It's a world of marks, on stone, in soil, in song. Oddest fact, some archaeologists argue that early human art wasn't just decorative or religious, it was a way of processing trauma. That the act of painting, of carving, helped early humans cope with the overwhelming. A mammoth crying beneath a storm wasn't just observation, it was catharsis. So maybe that's what this wall was. Not proof that mammoths cried, but proof that someone believed they did. And maybe that belief was enough. You glance back one last time as the shadows stretch. The red paint has faded, the smudge below the eye nearly vanished. Soon, moss will cover it. Rain will smooth it. The story will sink into the stone like a fossil of feeling. But you saw it, and so did they. The land ahead stretches flat again. No graveyards, no echoes, just open terrain, damp from the storm, a watercolor blend of browns and grays. The sky has lifted a little, no longer crushing, just heavy, like it's tired too. The herd walks without fanfare, steady and silent, not aimless, never that, but with a quiet urgency. And watching them, you get the sense they know something you don't. Not about where to go, but why they can't stop. It's not fear, it's hunger. You spot the signs early. A calf nudging at its mother's belly, not for comfort, but with that specific impatience of, I need more than warmth now. Another juvenile dips its head to a patch of soaked grass, pulls up a mouthful, chews twice, and spits it out. Not enough. The matriarch doesn't break stride, but her eyes are scanning. You see it. 1,000 pounds of wisdom focused entirely on forage. There's a new rhythm to her movements, now quicker, more lateral. Her trunk snakes out more often, sweeping the edges of shrubs, pausing only to inhale. Smell first, then move on. Because the rain may have passed, but the real danger is still here. And it doesn't roar, it whispers. Odd fact, mammoths had to eat over 300 pounds of vegetation a day. Bark, shrubs, sedges, grasses, whatever they could find in the frozen buffet of the Ice Age. Missing even one day's worth of calories could start a downward spiral. Especially for the young, the old, or the already weakened. So yes, they feared storms, but they feared starvation more. Historians still debate how mammoths managed large-scale food shortages. Some say they migrated in massive loops, always chasing greener pastures and melting edges. Others believe they relied on ancestral memory, matriarchs remembering forage zones across generations. Like living GPS systems with a firm grasp of seasonal survival. You watch her now, the matriarch stepping up onto a small hillock. She pauses, sniffs, stays perfectly still, then turns left. And the entire herd follows. No hesitation, no discussion. You realize then this isn't just about finding food, it's about knowing where it might be. Because moving isn't a choice, it's doctrine. A calf stumbles behind you, legs tangled in a root it couldn't see under the mud. The mother doubles back instantly, lifting the little one's rear with her forehead. No scolding, just urgency. Back on your feet, kid. We've got places to be. You follow close behind, breath fogging slightly, now colder again. The rain may be gone, but it's left behind something worse: scarcity. The matriarch's trunk raises suddenly high, almost vertical. She holds it there, smelling. And then you see it too. A patch of low shrubs ahead. Sparse but alive, just beyond a rocky rise. She speeds up. The others respond like water down a slope. You jog to keep up, boots squelching and sliding. And there at the top of the rise, you finally see it. a low basin still soggy from the storm but green. Not lush. Nothing is lush in this world but available. There are sedges, ferns, patches of frost-bitten grass clinging to life. The herd spills in. They don't roar or stampede. They descend with focus, trunks to ground, ears relaxed, mouths finally working with purpose. The calves practically dive. One lies flat in the greenery and starts chewing without lifting its head. Another kneels as it eats like it doesn't trust its legs to keep it upright anymore. The adults spread out a little, still close, still alert, but now eating. You sit at the edge of the basin watching, breathing slower now. It's strange how quickly desperation becomes peace. The storm was only hours ago, the missing one still gone. The graveyard still fresh behind you. But none of that matters right now, because now there's food. And that's enough. Oddest fact in cold-adapted herbivores. Hunger changes brain chemistry, making them more reactive, more aggressive, more prone to risk. Mammoths, likely no exception, may have gambled everything for a half-acre of green. So when they moved into storms, it wasn't bravery. It was calculation. Rain meant risk, but standing still meant death. The matriarch doesn't eat yet. She stands watch, scanning the basin like a shepherd counting sheep. Her eyes pass over every calf, every pair of shoulders, every bite. Only after she's satisfied does she lean down slowly and begin to feed. One calf tries to play, nudging a sibling with its trunk, a clumsy push toward a tussle, but the sibling growls softly and keeps chewing. Not now, later, if later comes. You realize something: for all the weight they carry, all the song and sorrow, mammoths are ruthlessly practical. Move forward, find food, shelter memory in motion. Even the youngest seem to know it. There's a solemnity to their chewing, a rhythm, like they understand this moment is temporary. That storms always return, and so does hunger, and so does loss. But still they eat, not with joy, with need. And somehow that's more powerful. The matriarch lifts her head again, just once, scans the sky, and chews. You match her, because tonight survival is enough. The wind has changed again, not stronger, just colder. You feel it crawling up your sleeve, slipping behind your neck, wrapping its fingers around your spine, like it's trying to remind you this isn't over. The mammoths feel it too. They've eaten, not enough to call it a feast. This basin wouldn't qualify as a salad bar by modern standards, but enough to fill bellies, silence calves, and loosen that invisible tension that had stretched across their backs since the storm began. But they don't stay. Already the matriarch is moving again, slowly, deliberately. Her trunk brushes the ground, not for food this time, but for tracks. She circles twice near a cluster of flattened grass, then rumbles low in her chest and begins walking northeast. The others don't question it. They fall in behind her as if some ancient law just passed through the soil. You follow again, boots slapping against the wet ground, heart heavier than before. You'd hoped they'd rest, that there'd be a moment, a long one, for calm. But that's not how this works, not here, not now, because storms are only one kind of threat, and survival. Survival doesn't wait for the sun to shine. Odd fact: researchers studying ancient steppe routes in the Arctic Circle discovered that mammoths walked the same migration paths for thousands of years. Same turns, same passes, same rest stops, their memory encoded in movement. Passed down not through speech or song, but through feet. And feet, unlike myths, don't forget. You crest a hill alongside them, breath catching in your throat as the world opens below a wide plain, flat, empty, familiar. The same path they always take, worn low from centuries of use. Even now, long after the Ice Age, satellite images sometimes show ancient migration trails through soil chemistry and vegetation differences, lines drawn by hooves, and grief. Historians still debate whether early humans learned to predict storms by watching mammoth behavior. There's enough anecdotal evidence and tribal memory to suggest they did songs about giants singing to the wind or tales of the woolly ones kneeling before skyfire. Whether myth or memory, something stuck. You imagine it now, a small band of humans huddled beneath firs, watching mammoths on the horizon, still silent weeping. And knowing then what science would only explain millennia later, pressure was changing. Something terrible was in the air, and the mammoths knew. A calf shivers beside you, its ears flapping like wet laundry. Its mother gently drapes her trunk over its back for a moment, holding it still. Not for warmth, for reassurance. You've seen this before, from parents on subway platforms, from birds nudging chicks beneath feathers, from strangers on cold mornings sharing coffee from trembling hands. It's always the same message. You're not alone. One of the sub-adults trumpets softly, not loud, not urgent, just to check in. The matriarch responds with a barely audible hum, like a sigh through a cathedral. And then movement. Far ahead, just along the tree line, a flash of orange. Not fire. People. You drop to a crouch instinctively. The mammoths do not. They don't panic, don't charge, don't react at all really, just adjust. Their path veers slightly left, arcing away from the firelight. No drama, no fear, just quiet avoidance. Because they remember us too. We hunted them, carved their bones into tools, etched their deaths onto cave walls, wore their hides like stolen stories. And yet we followed them, watched them, learned from them. Oddest fact, mammoth bones have been found arranged in early human dwellings, walls made from rib cages, doorways framed in tusks, not just trophies, architecture. We didn't just kill mammoths. We built our lives around them. You stay low, unsure if the humans in the distance can see you. They might, but they're not moving toward the herd. Not yet. Maybe they've eaten too. Maybe they remember what it's like to fear the sky. The matriarch doesn't look back. She doesn't need to. She knows the line between watching and hunting. She's walked it her whole life. And now the herd is accelerating again, gently. Not running, but aware. The calves are more alert. The subadults form a loose shield. You keep pace, but it's harder now. Your legs ache. Your breath catches. The storm didn't break you. Hunger didn't break you. But this steady movement, this eternal movement, it might. Because here's what no one tells you: survival isn't dramatic. It's not loud. It's not full of roaring triumph. Most of the time, it's just moving forward, step after heavy step, even when every part of you begs to stop. And that's the lesson the mammoths teach best. Not how to fight, but how to continue. You look back once at the firelight flickering faintly in the distance. It's still there, watching, waiting, just like the predators, just like the cold. But up ahead, the matriarch lifts her head again, trunk raised, sniffing the wind. She pauses, and you swear she smiles. If mammoths could smile, because something is different up ahead. Maybe drier air. Maybe a scent she remembers. Maybe just a feeling in her bones that says this way. She hums again, and the herd follows. And so do you. Because sometimes the only wisdom that matters is knowing which direction not to go back. There is no trail now, just space. Open, quiet, and vast. The kind of emptiness that feels earned, like the world has cleared its throat and finally decided to give you room. No thunder, no pressing wind. Just the quiet hiss of damp grass brushing against the herd's legs as they move across the plain. The matriarch walks slowly now, not because she's tired, but because there's no longer a need to rush. Her body sways gently with each step, tusks gliding in wide arcs like ancient punctuation marks. You watch the way she moves, and for a moment you forget the storms, the wolves, the hunger. She walks like there's nothing left to fear. But you've been with them long enough to know better. This calm is not peace. It's the moment after. It's what happens when the storm doesn't take you and you're left with the work of remembering. The herd fans out a little across the flatland, but not too much. Calves still cluster near mothers. Subadults stay close to the center. The old male lags slightly behind, but he's not struggling. He's watching the horizon. Odd fact, mammoths likely had a sense of time that was tied more to weather than to day or night. They didn't follow clocks or moons, but cycles. wind, pressure, the return of cold, the disappearance of green. They lived in loops, not lines. And you begin to see the loop here, too, because something in the way they move now feels familiar, ritualistic, like they've been to this place before. Maybe not this exact spot, but something close. Something with the same smell, the same open echo, the same worn groove beneath their feet. They're walking in memory. You lag behind watching them crest a small rise. The light is fading again, not storm dark, just dusk, soft and forgiving. The kind of twilight that doesn't scold. The matriarch pauses at the top. She looks back, and then she cries. No thunder, no pain, no storm this time. Just that long, low sound you first heard what feels like years ago, vibrating through the air, like the echo of a name you never learned how to pronounce. The herd stops with her. One by one they turn their heads, following her gaze not ahead, but behind. Not at you. At the past. At all the places they've left behind. The graves. The cave. The green basin. The one who never returned. They stand in silence for a long moment, and you feel it all well up again. The tears, the music, the weight of movement, and you understand something. This sound, it isn't for them. It's for us. Because we're the ones who forgot. We forgot how to listen to the air, how to follow storms instead of just hiding from them, how to know when to kneel, when to stop, when to continue. We forgot how to carry our dead in movement. We forgot that survival doesn't always come with a roar. It often arrives soaked, shivering, and tired, but still moving. And we forgot what a cry meant when it came from something bigger than memory. Historians still debate whether mammoths had complex emotional inner lives, whether they mourned, celebrated, feared, hoped. There are no diaries, no love letters, just fossils and stories carved into bones and stone. But watching them stand together still, under a calm sky, you realize the question was never whether they felt. It's whether we're still capable of seeing it. The matriarch's call fades. And then quietly the herd begins to move again. They don't look back. They don't need to, because they've already sung their goodbye. And in their wake, the silence lingers, not empty but full of presence. You wait until they're gone, their shapes dissolving into the dusk like a story told only once. Then you sit, and you breathe. And for the first time in a long while, you do not speak. Because somewhere in the rain-washed grass and the echo of giant footfalls, in the scent of ozone that still clings to your sleeves, you remember. The journey with the mammoths unfolds not as a spectacle of survival, but as a slow revelation of what it means to carry knowledge in silence. Through thunder, hunger loss, and low-voiced song, the mammoths show us a rhythm older than language. They do not dramatize their fear. They do not explain their rituals. They move because they must, because the earth shifts, because the sky whispers, because survival demands it. And yes, maybe they cried. Maybe their tears weren't metaphors or myths, but real responses to pressure, memory, and pain. Their cries weren't about noise, they were about presence, about reminding the world they were still here, still enduring, still connected to every storm they'd ever passed through. Even when one of them vanished, even when the predators circled, even when they walked across the graves of their own, in the end, they did not roar triumphantly. They did not pose for legacy. They moved forward. And perhaps that is legacy enough. We watched not as hunters or narrators, but as guests. In their shadow, we remembered how much we've lost, not just species, but ways of sensing the world. And in their final cry, fading into twilight, we heard something we'd almost forgotten, a sound we'll never hear again. But now we know it was real.